back to Like Maria. Today is another episode in our Zoom series, and Caroline's going to talk to us about Sunrise. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Maria.
So you're talking today, I think, about Murnau's Sunrise, one of the cinema greats. Can you tell us a little bit about why it is such a great film and how it acquired that status?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, to give it its full title, is at number 5 in the greatest films of all time in the Sight and Sound poll, a very famous poll that happens every 10 years. So it's undoubtedly, a masterpiece of filmmaking. However, Murnau is perhaps not that well known for Sunrise. If you were going to talk about him, you'd probably instantly think of the film Nosferatu, which is a very famous vampire film. The image of the vampire with the long fingernails and the hook nose, the teeth, these are all things that have moved into popular culture. All of our vampires now are influenced by that original image by Murnau. So Sunrise, in comparison, is not really that well known, but actually it's got a very interesting sort of production context. It is one of the last silent movies, so it's from a really specific period of time. It had quite a large budget. In fact, reportedly, Murnau was offered an unlimited budget to make this film in America, and possibly that's why it didn't do so well at the box office, because it was expensive. However, it was also up against lots of sound films, which people were going to watch. Despite all of this, though, it does some really interesting things. It pioneers the kind of use of moving camera, so we see sort of early tracking shots. It's also a story that combines lots of different ideas. There's a real sense of duality in the film. So there's this idea of town versus country, woman from the city versus the wife. And we've got this element of German Expressionism and realism combined in a film.
And you mentioned there the German Expressionism. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What sort of, how films fit into that genre?
Absolutely. So German Expressionism was a movement within art, poetry, architecture. It's got a long history, but the period that we're most interested in is sort of post-World War I, where obviously lots of people had experienced the trauma of war. Lots of people were depressed, traumatized, they'd seen shocking events happening. And Murnau was no exception to this. Apparently he crashed his plane about 8 times, something like that. So he had seen, lucky to survive, but he had seen lots of traumatic things. So this led within art and architecture and poetry, as I say, and film, to a particular style where kind of lines were much more jagged, realism was rejected. It was all about emotion, inner turmoil, clashing colours, a very specific style. Now in film, there was also the added issue that Germany was very isolated. Foreign language films, or foreign films rather, were banned. They weren't allowed to be imported for cinema, and budgets were very, very small. So German filmmakers had to come up with ways to entertain their audience on a limited budget, but in a very creative way. So films such as The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that is considered to be, almost the blueprint for German Expressionism, which has hand-painted sets which feature lots of sharp angles, lots of use of black and white to create a sort of shadowed effect. And it just feels unusual, uncomfortable to the eye. But as I say, Sunrise isn't a German Expressionist film. It was made in Hollywood. As I said, Murnau was offered lots of money to make the film, but the idea was that they would bring some of that culture and that style that Expressionism was known for to the sort of commercial element of Hollywood, which is, again, what makes this film so interesting.
And so there are only really 3 main characters in the film. We don't really get to know even their names. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
And why that is? I think it's because Murnau is kind of saying to us that this is a story that's universal. So again, going back to the German Expressionism and realism, he's not making a film that's either of those things. He's making a film that's universal, and that's the same for the story here. It's a universal tale, a story that has something for everyone, really. Interestingly, in the source material, just need to check the name, A Trip to Tilsit was the original novella that it was based on. The characters did have names. The man was called Anzus and the woman was called Indri. The woman from the city, however, still didn't have a name, which makes her, you know, quite interesting as a character. The wife and the woman from the city are complete opposites, and you know, that is shown through a number of different techniques. For example, there's this moment where we cross-cut from the woman in the city cradling the man to the wife cradling the child. And these two together show, you know, the wife's maternal instinct. She is kind of meant to be the sort of perfect ideal woman, you know. She's dressed all in kind of white, light colours. She's got this blonde wig. So she is meant to be this sort of angelic character, whereas the woman from the city, narcissistic. The first image we see of her, she's looking in the mirror, getting ready. She's smoking a cigarette, a sort of phallic object, and she's dressed all in black. And the black is sort of shiny, almost snake-like in its style. So there's that clear distinction between those two characters. The man, although perhaps he's less interesting, some might say, he's kind of got a horror element to him. He's sort of a bit monstrous, particularly in the way that he walks and the way that he towers above his wife at certain times. But again, he's got that inner turmoil that is suggested by German Expressionism, and a really good scene for everyone to watch. Well, an extended sequence, I suppose, would be the opening where the woman from the city sort of calls to him. He comes out, they go into the marshes, and then afterwards he goes back, and there's all this kind of very dark, low-key lighting that suggests kind of the fact that he's trapped. Lots of interesting things to talk about in that sequence, so definitely have a look at that.
And just for those of us who aren't 100% familiar, could you just briefly outline the plot there for us?
Sure, it's a very simple story of a man who kind of gets lured away from the family by this woman from the city. She suggests murder, he agrees. He takes his wife off to the city for the day, is about to murder her and just can't do it. The rest of the film then is about the man and his wife recapturing their love and sort of almost being remarried and having a honeymoon and so on. Now, again, spoiler, this is where, you know, everything starts to go wrong. They head back home. There is genuinely a storm. The wife goes overboard. He thinks that she is dead. But is hugely relieved to find that she has survived. And then, of course, the woman from the city is given the heave-ho.
So it does indeed sound like a very pleasant, simple little tale, really. Do you think that the story is told simply?
It definitely is a simple story. You know, it warns of the dangers of being seduced by the woman from the city, who's sort of an early femme fatale character, and it reminds us of the simple pleasures of home. But in terms of how it's told, it is and would have been quite complex at that time. So as I said, there were already sort of new kind of ways of filming movement, which is hugely influential to later filmmakers. We've also got things like the use of flashbacks to show what life was like. And we've also got lots of double exposure at different times, which would have been quite tricky, you know, sort of masking off elements of their already kind of taken film and then refilming on it. So, you know, all of those different things, as well as the kind of lighting and the fact that this is a silent film, but actually there are sounds that punctuate the action. All of that makes it quite complex and quite rightly earns it its title of a masterpiece.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I've certainly learned an awful lot. There's obviously a lot to this film, and I have learnt a lot today, so thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and we will be back soon with some more film analysis for you.